The first rays of sunlight pierced through the kitchen window as Mark poured his coffee, watching his German shepherd, Rex, packing restlessly by the back door. For 3 years, Rex had been his constant companion, loyal, obedient, almost eerily intelligent. But this morning was different. Rex's ears were pinned back, his muscular body tense as a coiled spring. His amber eyes darted between Mark and the dense forest that bordered their property. A low whine escaped his throat, urgent, insistent, desperate. "What is it, boy?" Mark asked, setting down his mug. Rex barked once, sharp, commanding. Then he pawed at the door with such force that his claws scraped against the wood, leaving white marks in their wake. Mark had never seen him like this. He grabbed his jacket and opened the door. Rex bolted immediately, disappearing into the morning mist that clung to the forest floor like ghostly fingers. Mark's heart hammered in his chest as he ran after him, branches whipping against his face, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Rex, wait." But Rex wouldn't stop, and something told Mark he shouldn't either. The forest grew darker with each step. Towering pines blocked out the sun, casting long shadows that seemed to move and breathe. The temperature dropped. Mark's breath formed white clouds in the suddenly frigid air. Rex was 20 yards ahead now, his black and tan coat flashing between the trees. He moved with purpose, following some invisible trail that only he could sense. Every few seconds, he'd look back to make sure Mark was following, those intelligent eyes burning with an emotion Mark couldn't quite name. Fear, no, determination, urgency. They'd been running for 15 minutes when Mark realized something chilling. He had no idea where they were. The forest was supposed to be small, maybe 2 square miles, but they'd gone far beyond any boundary he knew. The trees here were older, gnarled, their roots twisted above the ground like arthritic fingers reaching for something long forgotten. Then Rex stopped. He stood rigid at the edge of a steep ravine, his body trembling. A sound echoed from below, faint, almost imperceptible, but Mark heard it. A cry, human, weak. Someone was down there. Mark's stomach dropped as he peered over the edge. The ravine plunged at least 30 feet into a shadowy abyss filled with jagged rocks and fallen timber. The morning light barely penetrated the depths, but he could make out a small figure at the bottom, crumpled and motionless. "Hello," Mark's voice cracked. "Can you hear me?" The figure stirred. A child's voice, thin as paper, drifted up. "Help, please." Rex was already moving, finding a narrow path that zigzagged down the ravine's face. Mark followed, his hands grabbing at roots and rocks, his feet slipping on loose gravel. Every step sent small avalanches of dirt cascading below. Halfway down, Mark's foot caught on a root. He fell hard, tumbling, his shoulder slamming into a boulder. Pain exploded through his body. For a moment he couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Rex was there instantly, his cold nose pressing against Mark's face, his warm breath a comfort in the freezing air. Those eyes locked onto Mark's, steady, reassuring, urging him forward. "I'm okay," Mark gasped, pulling himself up. "I'm okay." They reached the bottom. The child was a girl, maybe 7 years old, wearing a purple jacket now torn and muddy. Her leg was bent at an unnatural angle, her face pale as moonlight. Her lips were blue. "How long have you been here?" Mark asked, already removing his jacket to wrap around her. 2 days, she whispered. "I got lost. No one came." 2 days and near freezing temperatures. How was she even alive? Mark pulled out his phone. No signal. Of course not. They were too deep, too far from civilization. He needed to get her out, but she couldn't walk, and he wasn't sure he could carry her up that ravine alone. That's when he noticed something impossible. The ground around the girl was warm. Not just warmer than it should be, actually warm, as if heated from below. The rocks near her body were dry, while everything else was damp with morning dew. A circle of warmth, roughly 6 feet in diameter, surrounded her completely. and in that circle the temperature was comfortable, almost pleasant. Rex circled the area, sniffing intently. He stopped at a spot 3 feet from the girl and began digging frantically, his powerful paws sending dirt flying. Rex, no, we don't have time. But Rex wouldn't stop. He dug deeper, until his entire head disappeared into the hole. Then he emerged, something gripped gently in his jaws. A thermal blanket, emergency silver, slightly dirty but intact. Mark's blood ran cold. Someone had been here. Someone had wrapped this child in a thermal blanket and left her. No, that didn't make sense. He looked at the girl. Sweetheart, did someone help you? Did someone give you this blanket? She shook her head weakly. No one came. I was so cold. Then I woke up and I was warm. I thought I was dreaming. Rex moved to another spot and dug again. This time he unearthed a water bottle, half full, with teeth marks on the cap. Small teeth marks. The girl's eyes widened. I remember. I was so thirsty, and a water bottle just appeared. I thought angels brought it. Mark's mind raced. The blanket, the water, the impossible warmth keeping her alive for 2 days. Rex sat beside the girl now, and that's when Mark saw it, saw what he'd been too panicked to notice before. Rex's paws were scraped raw, dirt caked under every nail. His coat was matted with mud along his belly and legs, as if he'd been lying on cold ground for hours. There were scratches along his snout, fresh from digging. And suddenly, impossibly, Mark understood. You've been coming here, Mark whispered, his voice breaking. Haven't you, boy? Rex's ears perked up. His tail gave one slow wag. Mark knelt beside his dog, his hands trembling as he examined Rex's paws more carefully. The injuries weren't fresh from today. Some were a day old. Some were 2 days old, healing beneath the dirt and dried blood. For 2 nights, while Mark slept soundly in his bed, Rex had been slipping out through the dog door, running miles into these woods, lying beside a stranger's child to keep her warm, bringing her water, covering her with whatever he could find, returning home before dawn so Mark would never know. Until this morning, when Rex finally understood the child was too weak to survive another night, when he'd made the desperate decision to bring Mark here, to break his silence and lead his human to the rescue. You saved her, Mark breathed, tears streaming down his face. You saved her life. The girl reached out with a trembling hand and touched Rex's face. The angel had fur, she whispered. I remember now, warm fur and a heartbeat. Mark wrapped his arms around Rex, feeling the steady, loyal rhythm of that enormous heart. This dog, this incredible creature, had done what no human had managed to do. He'd found a lost child that search parties had missed, and he'd kept her alive through sheer will and compassion. But they weren't safe yet. Mark fashioned a makeshift stretcher from branches and his jacket. He secured the girl as gently as possible, whispering reassurances as she whimpered in pain. The climb would be brutal, but there was no other way. Rex led them up, testing each foothold first, his body language telling Mark where to step, where to avoid. The dog's intelligence was almost supernatural. He anticipated every obstacle, every danger. Halfway up, Mark's arms screamed with exhaustion. The girl was light, but the angle was steep and his grip was failing. His foot slipped on loose shale. They started to slide backward. Rex was there in an instant, his body wedging between them and the drop-off, his powerful legs bracing against the rocks. Mark used Rex's body as leverage, pushing off him to regain his footing. The dog didn't flinch, didn't move, even though Mark knew it must have hurt. Just a little further, Mark gasped. Come on, boy, we can do this. And they did. Inch by agonizing inch, they climbed until finally, they crested the edge and collapsed onto solid ground. Mark's lungs burned, his muscles screamed, but relief flooded through him like warm water. The girl was crying softly, but she was alive. They'd made it. Mark carried the girl through the forest, following Rex, who seemed to know exactly which direction led home. The dog never hesitated, never doubted, leading them through the maze of trees as if he'd memorized every trunk and stone. When they emerged from the forest edge, Mark's neighbor was in her yard. Her eyes went wide. "Call 911, Mark shouted, "now." The ambulance arrived within minutes. Paramedics swarmed the girl, checking vitals, starting IVs, asking questions. Police came next. Then news crews, drawn by the scanner reports of a child found after 2 days missing. The girl's parents arrived in a screaming rush of tires on gravel. Her mother collapsed beside the stretcher, sobbing, touching her daughter's face as if she couldn't believe she was real. "How did you find her?" the father asked Mark, his voice raw with emotion. "We searched for 2 days. Helicopters, dogs, hundreds of volunteers. How?" Mark looked at Rex, who sat calmly beside him, watching the chaos with those wise, ancient eyes. "I didn't find her," Mark said quietly. "He did." The news coverage was instant. By evening, Rex's photo was everywhere. The German shepherd who had saved a lost child through loyalty and love beyond measure. Experts called it miraculous. Scientists said it was impossible that a dog would make such decisions independently, would sacrifice his own comfort night after night for a stranger. But Mark knew better. He'd always known Rex was special. He just hadn't understood how special until now. 3 weeks later, Mark stood in his backyard, watching Rex patrol the fence line as he did every evening. The girl, Emma, had made a full recovery. Her family visited often, bringing treats and toys that Rex politely ignored in favor of his favorite tennis ball. At the ceremony where Rex received a medal for heroism, Emma had limped forward on her healing leg and thrown her arms around him. "My angel," she'd whispered into his fur. Rex had simply leaned into her embrace, his tail wagging slowly as if to say, "I know, and I'd do it again." Mark thought about all the nights he'd slept peacefully while Rex had been out in the cold, lying beside a frightened child, sharing his warmth and his presence, never asking for recognition, never seeking reward, just doing what his heart told him was right. That's the thing about love, real love. It doesn't calculate, it doesn't weigh costs and benefits, it doesn't ask what's in it for me. Real love simply acts. It runs into the darkness, it lies in the cold, it digs and searches and never ever gives up. Rex looked back at Mark then, across the yard, and their eyes met. In that moment, Mark understood something profound. He hadn't rescued Rex from that shelter 3 years ago. Rex had been waiting for the moment when he could show Mark and the world what it truly means to be loyal, to be brave, to be unconditionally loving. Some angels have wings. Some have fur and 4 legs and a heart bigger than the sky. And if you're very, very lucky, one of them chooses you to be their human. The most extraordinary acts of heroism often come from the most unexpected heroes. Love doesn't need words. It just needs a willing heart and the courage to act when it matters most.